In recent weeks on West 12th Street, there's been a billboard that has John Wayne depicted with his typical Western hat and vest, and the big quote in large letters that says, "I don't care much for sinners, son." And at first I was afraid that it was an advertisement for some tobacco company, and thankfully it wasn't. It was advertising the TV channel Grit. And it's surprising that there is a TV channel dedicated to a whole genre of movies and TV shows that kind of harken back to an era, whether or not it was real or a Hollywood creation, but there was an era where we believed where men were men, and you were good to your word, that you didn't waffle around and change your mind on ideas, particularly anything that you thought was right. When the going got tough, the tough got going, and you could tell the character of a man by the firmness of his handshake. Clearly, there's many things in that are a bit dated, particularly now with social distancing where shaking of the hand is taboo. But it's also a show that, or a genre that seems to have a few problems, or at least seems to be politically correct according to our current standards. It seemed to be dripping with testosterone and laden with some patriarchal ideals. However, there is some goodness to this, I would imagine. We have to sift through some stuff that needs to go away, but there is an appeal to what we would refer to as fidelity. So we have to be careful about not allowing our ego to run wild with this, that we can just kind of forge ahead with what we think is right, and as long as we stick to what we think is right, we're okay. In reality, we always have to determine what is truth through a constant process of course correction and evaluation, use of our conscience. We didn't put spacecraft in orbit around the moon with just one good shot. It was course corrected as it got closer, always making some adjustments in the process. So if we're going to pejoratively label anyone who uses their conscience or changes their mind as a quitter, that would be a very sad state of affairs. But in reality, there is a virtue to sticking with the process, to being persistent, because there's all sorts of distractions and problems in our world that could really kind of confuse us, misguide us, and so we have to be attentive to kind of adhering to what we think or know is true. It's in this process where faith really lies. And so in our first reading, we hear this example of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are willing to go into the furnace as opposed to renege on their fidelity to worshiping God alone. And they have an interesting point. They say, even if God doesn't save us, we're not going to go forward with betraying God. I think it would go an even step further to say, what if God didn't exist? Are they willing to risk their current life, even at the risk that there is no afterlife, that there is no reward for their fidelity? And that's a hypothetical thing, but I think deep down that's at the crux of many issues of faith, because faith is uncertain. We don't have proof that God exists. We don't have proof that there's an afterlife. We have 2,000 years of tradition based upon the resurrection of Christ, but comes down to it, there's no hard evidence. So we have to live our lives under presumption that we're right. And that is where faith lives. So there's many situations in our world where people of real character are making a difference, and they're not quite sure it's going to matter. It's the people who are on the front lines that would say, I would rather put my life at risk. I would rather do the best that I can to try to save a dying patient, when in reality that's probably not going to make a difference. They're the ones that are advancing humankind. They are the ones that allow us to transcend our instincts, our basic method of operation, to kind of move further with something that is beyond our explanation, beyond our reason. So when somebody writes poetry and figures that no one's ever going to read it, it still does good. If someone acts in love, even if it's unrequited, it still is good. It is in our ability and our willingness to do things despite our reason, despite logic, that perhaps is the only thing that really proves that God exists here and now.